This week in Rabbi Guzik's column, The Bissel Torah, if you saw it yesterday, she posed a question that a lot of us think about but don't really articulate. And that is, are you a Purim person or are you a Passover person? And it doesn't mean the food, but it means the feeling that you have with Purim. If you're a Purim person, you're okay with a lot of chaos, finding joy in the most unexpected places. We dress up and don't look like ourselves. In fact, the Megillah tells us at the end, La Yehudim hayta'ora v'simcha v'sason. At the end of our victory, the Jewish people should experience this light and this gladness and this joy. If you're a Passover person, and you have about 28 days for that, then you appreciate structure. A Seder actually means order. Everybody has a part in a certain time. And as I was thinking about that question, I was thinking about if you are a Purim person, how or what place can you get double the fun? And if you're not a Purim person, how can you avoid it everywhere? And there's only one place in the world that you can do this, and where is that? It's in Israel. This is going to be a bit of a riddle, so hopefully you'll follow the logic, but it is a really fascinating moment because today, as you'll see in a moment, it's actually historical. In Israel, most of the country celebrates Purim on the day that we celebrate Purim, which is the 14th of Adar, which today was Thursday night and Friday. What do? We read the Megillah, we do Mishloach Manot, we give food gifts to our friends, Matanot le'evyonim, we give gifts to the poor. But if you live in a city with walls, most famously where in Israel? Jerusalem. When do you celebrate Purim? Anybody awake? The 15th of Adar, which is the next day. Why? Historically, because where did the Purim story take place? In what city in Persia? Shushan, which today is Hamadan. And there, since it took an extra day of battling, the celebration was delayed a day. And so in walled cities, it's the 15th of Adar, and the rest of the world, it is the 14th of Adar. The 15th of Adar, therefore, is called Shushan Purim. And here's what happens in Israel. If you are a Purim person, I suggest you start in Tel Aviv on the 14th of Adar, and you double the party, you run to Jerusalem in the evening. On the 15th of Adar, you get another day of Purim. We're going to get there in a second. But if you are not a Purim person, what do? Stay in Jerusalem. And then when it's switched, go to Tel Aviv, and it's as if Purim never existed. So in Israel, you can choose to be a Purim person or not. That is an introduction to today. Because, as you might know, since Purim was Thursday night and yesterday on Friday, today is the 15th of Adar, and it's Shushan Purim. But what is today? Besides Ella's Bat Mitzvah, it's Shabbat. And so today, this weekend, is something that rarely occurs. It's called Purim Meshulash. In the Hebrew, you have Meshulash, which comes from Shalosh, which is 3. And so there is a 3-part Purim. So if you are a Purim person, you're in great luck. And if you are not, too bad. But I want to explain what happens on Purim Meshulash, because Purim Meshulash is not going to happen again for another 20 years, in the year 2045. Why can't Shushan Purim be today? Why can't we celebrate that second day of Purim if you're in Jerusalem today? Because some of the mitzvot, like giving gifts to the poor, right? We don't give tzedakah on Shabbat. But it's connected to the Megillah, so what do we do with that? So let me explain for a moment what happens literally yesterday, today, and tomorrow in Jerusalem. If you are a Jerusalemite, and our friends and family that are there, they this year read the Megillah the same time that we read it on Thursday night and Friday. They gave matanot le'evyonim, gifts to the poor, yesterday before Shabbat, because that mitzvah is connected to the Megillah. But mishloach manot, they reserved to tomorrow, on Sunday, and the Seudat Purim, the meal of Purim, is also tomorrow. And finally, if you went to a synagogue in Jerusalem today, it would look different than a synagogue in any part of the country, because they read the piece of Torah that we read yesterday in Cone Chapel today, because it's still Shushan Purim. There will be no test on this, but it is fascinating how the world, depending on where you are today, is celebrating Purim in a different way. And while there won't be a test on the technicalities of this, I want to really get into the deeper message, what I find about Purim Meshulash. And it's two. Number one, we do not delay joy. But number two, this year especially, we actually have the ability to extend joy. We don't delay it, as we saw. Yes, the rabbis could have said, read the Megillah on Sunday, just push it all back. But they said, no, we don't want to go 14th, 15th of Adar without actually reading that Purim story. Do not delay it. Read the Megillah like everybody else. Give those gifts to the poor. And then extend it tomorrow. Have that meal. Give mishloach manot to your friends. And when thinking about these two concepts of not delaying joy and also extending joy, I couldn't help but think about this year in particular. A year where we have found it so difficult to celebrate while others have been in sorrow. Because joy may not be what we desire, but according to our rabbis, even in the most difficult of circumstances, joy is in fact what we need. I want to look at a different part of the Jewish calendar for one moment, Tisha B'Av, the 9th day of Av. If Tisha B'Av, when we commemorate the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem, if that falls on Shabbat, what do? Do we do it earlier? We delay it. A beautiful message that if we are talking about destruction, let's put that off a little. But if we are talking about joy, the rabbis say, let's bring it in earlier. And so why? Why do the rabbis make this exception for Purim Meshulash? And I want to read for you an excerpt of a book written by 20th century theologian Rabbi Eliezer Berkovitz. His book was called With God in Hell, Judaism in the Death Camps. And this is the story that he tells. Rabbi Nissen Scheinberg from Boronowitz, who on Shushan Purim in 1942, today, Shushan Purim, stood with a group of Sloben Hasidim as the Germans prepared a bloodbath in which thousands of Jews were to be murdered. As they prepared themselves to be Jewish martyrs, Rabbi Nissen Scheinberg called to the other Jews who were standing with him. He said, let us not forget that today is Purim. Let us drink l'chaim to life. He took a few of the other Jews around him and he began dancing the Hora and singing songs of Purim. He shouted with joy until the Nazis ended his life. Rabbi Berkovitz writes in telling the story that Rabbi Nissen was a sign of ultimate faith. And ultimate faith is superior to any enemy's might that allows the soul to rise to the highest exaltation. And this is only one of the many similar stories that you can read in Holocaust literature. And as you may have heard, especially during these past 2 weeks of the hostages released, and I was sent this one-pager. It says, how the hostages celebrated Shabbat in Gaza. You may have heard some of these stories, but it's worth repeating. Omer Shem Tov, released a couple of weeks ago. When I met his mother last May, she told us, and it was hard to believe, that every Shabbat he made Kiddush, and that was, she heard from a hostage that was with him that already was released. And here Omer Shem Tov made Kiddush on a half a bottle of grape juice. And miraculously, as you might have heard, it lasted 5 months. Elia Cohen made Kiddush every week on a cup of water. Agam Berger refused to work on Shabbat. Danielle Gilboa, if you haven't seen this video, it's worth seeing. She learned to sing Shalom Aleichem in Arabic because it was the only language she was permitted to speak, but she still welcomed the angels. And Keith Siegel, recently released, started to make blessing on bread, the motzi, and say the Shema every single day. And his first Shabbat out of Gaza, he asked for a kippah, so he can continue to do that as well. How important is this holiday of Purim? You might know it sounds like another holiday that's very different. Yom Kippurim. The rabbis say Yom Kippurim is like Purim. Kippurim, it is like Purim. What do they mean? The rabbis say that when the Mashiach comes, when the Messiah comes, every holiday we won't need except one. Not Yom Kippur, but it will be Purim because of the joy that it brings all of us. On the surface, Purim is pretty simple. The other day I sat in the preschool classroom and we sang, "Oh, today we'll merry, merry be and eat some Hamantaschen." But what's behind that mask of Purim? As we just heard from these stories, in our lifetime, the divine intervention that is within us every day. Ironically, the word God, God's name, is not found once in the Megillah, but the divine intervention of God's actions is found everywhere. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs had a beautiful teaching of what is the unique joy of Purim. He says that if we think that Purim is celebrating that we were not annihilated, that's not it. He said that's not joy, but that's relief. He said joy is not survival, but joy is thriving. That yes, joy means that even with the threats that we have, that we will not be defined by our adversaries. As people know, we have and continue to have darkness within our people. But we know that we are a people that when we rejoice, our soul never breaks. And so I want to conclude with a beautiful story that happened yesterday morning at our minyan. It was not Shushan Purim, it was the regular Purim. In our daily minyan, we read the Megillah, read so beautifully by our ritual director, Jay Harwitt. And since it was Purim, we did the special Torah reading with 3 aliyot. And on the third aliyah, our Gabbai, Ebi Tabarai, he usually distributes the aliyot, and he said this: anybody who is here that has roots or is from the city of Hamadan, of Shushan, come up for the third aliyah. I didn't come up. But there were about 7 or 8 people in our minyan from Shushan. Raise your hand if you're from Hamadan here. Yes. When they came up from the Torah and they read from the Parsha that says, Zecher Amalek, remember the Amalekite people, and remembering that Amalekites wanted to wipe us off the face of the earth. And then I heard the words from the people of Hamadan, Baruch Ata Adonai Notein HaTorah. Thank you, we bless God for giving us the Torah. That, my friends, is divine intervention. What if Esther knew? What if Esther knew that when she risked her life to go to King Achashverosh, that a couple of thousand years later in a city called Los Angeles, the city of angels, 8 people from Hamadan would stand up and say the blessings of the Torah as we read that we should never forget Amalek and at the same time wipe their name off the earth. And what if Esther knew that today a young woman like Ella would celebrate her bat mitzvah, proud of her Jewish identity with Ella power or perhaps Esther power, that we need more and more today. And so this weekend is unique. It's called Purim Meshulash. It's a 3-day Purim. We get more time to extend our joy. And so just one ask for you tomorrow. Bring back the costume. Eat one more Hamantaschen. Give a gift to the poor. And give Mishloach Manot to your neighbors. Let's unite with the Jews of Jerusalem and all the cities, all the walled cities around this world, to make sure that we continue to celebrate the remarkable story of our people. To those in Jerusalem, we say Chag Purim Sameach, and to all of us, a Shabbat Shalom.